Okay, I think we've gotten everybody that confirmed, at least on the line. So if other folks want to join, of course, we'll welcome them to do so. But I think we're safe to begin.
Just got one more.
Oh, great. All right, well, on that note, I'm going to go ahead then and introduce our fearless leader here today. I'd like to introduce Richard Needles. He is our discussion leader for today's webinar, and Richard started his own leadership and team coaching business back in 2006 after 25 years in executive corporate human resources roles for organizations like Battelle and Sterling Commerce. Richard is an honors graduate of The Ohio State University in business administration and human resources management. And he is a certified stakeholder. He is certified in stakeholder-centered coaching, which is a Marshall Goldsmith program. He's served as a coach in multiple engagements with groups like Huntington Bank, National Church Residences, Vitamix, OCLC, and many other small, medium, and large organizations. Richard is actively working with Ohio Capital in a few different areas, and I want to thank him for leading our session today. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. I don't know about everybody else's screens, but mine has filled up with a whole bunch of little boxes with some very smart looking people in it. So thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our conversation. For those of you who participated in the webinar I did last July on coaching for performance and growing your career, you'll see some similar themes, but we're going to make today a little bit more personal and then bring it back to the organizational. So if I can share my screen here, I will start a slide deck. I think everybody's been admitted now. And let me... I will ask Joyce if she can see my screen.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, very good. So Joyce and I are going to be partners in the session today, and I'm going to ask Joyce to keep an eye on the chat boxes, and also if we have any polling questions as we launch those, Joyce will be my partner in looking at those answers and going through some of those. So today's conversation is about emotional intelligence, using that as a foundation for psychological safety. As I mentioned earlier, the webinar I did in July was about coaching, how you grow your own career, how do you help others meet the goals that they want to achieve. This is going to be a little bit more personal, and then that connection. And Joyce, I'll ask if you see anybody raise their hand or put a question in chat, that you feel free to interrupt me as we talked about that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Very good. So the goal for today is to learn together and grow together. Quick intros and overview, some of my stand-up comedy. I hope people are ready to laugh at me teasing myself. And then the topic of emotional intelligence components. We're also going to glance at the impact of our personality types. I know DISC is used at Ohio Capital. I'll make some connections to DISC type and how that can show up in our emotional intelligence. And then the TBR, you'll see a formula coming up that I'll tell some Richard Needles stories and lessons. We will define what psychological safety is, and we're going to talk about trust and accountability. I want to make the point early that creating psychological safety in an organization also includes trusting people and holding each other accountable. Then we're going to have some time for small group work and action and reflection at the end. So I'm going to put you to work about how do we each own this. Joyce gave you the formal Richard intro. I always like to start with a silly slide to note that Joan and I have been together for 46 years, no kids, 2 cats. I show this slide to note that some of these things I talk about today can actually help with long-term relationships. And I have some experience and hopefully some credibility in long-term relationship. The other thing I'll mention, Joyce gave the Richard intro, but the deep dive on that is 170 one-on-one coaching engagements. I've participated in 5 leadership assessment centers, executive development programs, and I have coached over 20 intact teams. And that all reinforces the GROW coaching model. That is, we grow as individuals, we grow as teams. When we set a goal, we look at our current reality, we look at the options, and then we make a commitment for what will we do. Goal, reality, option, and will are linked to any personal or team development growth. As I mentioned, today is going to be a little bit more personal, and I want to start with this quote from Maya Angelou. I've heard this quote many times. It's been around for a while. What I found was it has been attributed to Maya Angelou. And that is, if we think about emotional intelligence, emotional connections to other people, this quote says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I think about the very first boss I had at Battelle, right out of college at Ohio State. I needed to learn a whole bunch of technical stuff, but I always remember Gary made me feel appreciated. Janet, my second boss, made me feel appreciated, made me feel included. I'm not sure I could tell you some of the technical stuff they taught me in HR many years ago, but I remember them for how they made me feel. Let's remember this as we interact with each other. Starting with emotional intelligence, and I'm going to assume that many people have heard of this concept of emotional intelligence. Sometimes it's called emotional quotient. I first started working with some of these Daniel Goleman materials back in the 1990s and setting up a leadership corporate university. Daniel Goleman, psychologist, journalist, found in his research that 80% of success in a career is due to emotional intelligence. Now, we need a foundation of finance skills, accounting skills, business development skills, analysis skills, but 80% is a really big number. That makes a difference in how we succeed. So we're going to talk about what is emotional intelligence, what are those components, and how do we link them back to the organization. Daniel Goleman's work really was centered on defining emotional intelligence. And I have a box here to say, emotional intelligence is a personal attribute. It starts with self-awareness. Am I aware of my own habits and patterns? Am I aware of my normal behaviors? Am I aware of what I need from other people? Am I aware of some of my stress behaviors or some of my overdone behaviors? I have awareness first. Second component is regulation. Can I modify, regulate some of those behaviors? I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Can I motivate myself to changing my behavior when the change in behavior is the right thing to do for the other people I'm interacting with or the situation I'm find myself in? Then the fourth component is empathy. Am I aware, do I have awareness of how other people are feeling? Do I watch body language? Do I watch tone of voice? Do I listen for pace of voice? What words they might emphasize? Are they withdrawing? Are they becoming too much over the top? Do I have empathy for how they're feeling right now? And then the fifth component of emotional intelligence is social skill. And can I help people move forward? If people are behaving in a way that's productive, can I reinforce that? If they're behaving in a way that's not productive, can I help them change that behavior? So self-awareness of my own style, being able to regulate, pause, motivate myself to a different style if needed, understand where you are, and help you move forward. Very basic emotional, personal attribute. I'll ask if there's any questions about any of this, and if you want to pop a question into the chat box, please feel free, and again, Joyce will keep track of that. Influencing emotional intelligence is our personality type. So since Ohio Capital uses DISC, And I know that there are many personality inventories, personality profiles that use a 2x2 or quadrant based. If you think of D, I, S, and C, I have these boxes colored because I also use something called the Berkman, which aligns very nicely with DISC, and they use colors. Some of these tools use letters, some use colors, some use numbers, and some use animals, but many of them are 2x2s. So if you think about understanding your self-awareness, if you're high D on the DISC, you like to build, organize, solve problems, move things through quickly, move tasks quickly. Usually you're friendly, decisive, energetic, straightforward. You need a little bit more matter of fact. Relationships, you need to know who's in charge. You've got an outlet for your energy. High I on the DISC, interested in selling, motivating, persuading, probably showing up as a little bit more enthusiastic, flexible, sometimes competitive. You need variety, broad scheduling, and under stress can become easily distracted. High S's like to deal with the abstractions, kind of those connections, see patterns. They're also the supportive, more sensitive style. They need that individual reassurance. Under stress, they may pull in. They may get a little defensive, find it hard to move forward. High C's on the DISC, sometimes called the conscientious type, interested in the detailed work, policies, order, concentration. They need specific direction. They need to know, how are we going to get things done? And under stress can become over insistent. So when I think about my own type, I'm high I, secondary D, which means I'm usually friendly, direct, logical. Under stress, I will admit I can become rude, insensitive, impatient. So for myself, I need to make sure I slow down. I need to make sure I slow down. For S's and C's on the DISC, under stress, they may be pulling inward. So we may need to help that person in social skill, ask them an open-ended question to get them talking, to get them to move forward. So I'm just going to ask people, if you're aware of your DISC, know that it comes with those positives and it comes with some of those more negative stress behaviors. Any questions about DISC or that connection before I move on? And again, I'll ask Joyce to keep track of things in the chat box.
Richard, I will just note that since we've had several new folks join lately that haven't taken the DISC yet, please bear with us. You will have your opportunity to do that as well. But nonetheless, you should probably still be able to look at this and recognize yourself in one or two of these boxes.
Okay. And Joyce, while you and I can still be open for dialogue here, I believe you did send out a 2-pager prior to the session today. And for people who have that 2-pager, this is on the back of your document or page 2. And as Joyce just said, if you haven't gone through DISC, you can look at this and probably tell which one you are. And then did I see my friend Tony pop up with a question?
Yeah, Richard, more of a comment or follow up on Joyce's note that, and Joyce, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that out there in OCCH today on our Teams platform, there is an inventory where everyone's DISC profile by person is out there so that one can discover where our colleagues are on the continuum, so you know how to show up for them specifically, right?
That is correct. We got that last fall. We don't have an updated one from the last few months, but we are awaiting that. So, but for anybody that needs to look up your colleagues' DISC scores to learn how to best approach them, this is available on our Teams page.
Very good. And that will build very nicely for psychological safety. Thank you both. So when we think about the negatives and positives of our personality and how we can improve, if you have the worksheet in front of you, I'm going to ask you to just pause and take a look at that and rate how you think you might be on self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. And then we'll do a quick poll. I will confess that for myself, I'm pretty aware. I've been doing this kind of work. I've taken a lot of profiles myself. I've been doing this a lot. And I would say that awareness is probably pretty good for me. Regulation. Sometimes it's hard for me to motivate myself, quite frankly. When I get bullheaded, I don't want to change behavior. So that's my confession for you. So let's see if we can launch a quick poll. And I will ask you to complete this poll. Which is your highest rated component? Are you self-aware? Are you pretty good at pausing, self-regulating? Are you pretty good at motivating? You really kind of pick up on those cues and empathy for other people, and or social skill, which is your highest? So it looks like everybody's answered. And Joyce, can you see the poll?
No, I cannot.
There we go.
But there we go. I see it now. Thank you.
So this is interesting to me that we've got probably about a third, it looks like 17 of 45 would say self-awareness, motivation, empathy, very good. So we've got 19 of 45 who feel that's their strong suit of recognizing that what other people might need, and fewer on self-regulation and social skill. Doesn't mean this group can't do it, but I see that the others were probably more highly rated. So my comment or coaching item would be, if you see one of these in which you know you need work, we're going to talk about how you can get better, and there'll be some tips at the end of the webinar. Obviously, perhaps stopping and pausing might be something we want to talk about. Any questions on that? Okay, can you, and Joyce, we can see the screen again? Okay, so let me dive through these, get back to where I was. So taking a big picture view of psychological safety, we've just glanced at the internal, personal, emotional intelligence. Now we're going to bring it back to this new concept that's become fairly common discussion point in organizations in the last 5 years, certainly a little bit more in the last decade, but the last 5, this has really taken off in a lot of their organizational research. And it's this concept of psychological safety. The person who really got a lot of publicity about this is Dr. Amy Edmondson, a Harvard professor in leadership and management. And what got her interested in this was several research studies she did on teams. And she looked at what does the research tell me about successful teams? And she first started this work in hospitals, and fascinatingly enough, discovered that the highest performing teams in hospitals were the teams that admitted the most mistakes. What that means is they had created an environment where they could learn together. They were safe to be vulnerable and say, I think I made a mistake. Simultaneously, when she was doing a lot of this research, Google launched a research within their own organization on what makes a successful team. They studied 180 teams, and they went into a lot of factors. Is it a mix of personality types? Is it a mix of technical skills? It is a mix of functions. And none of those things correlated. What they discovered were the most successful teams had some cultural attributes where they could take risks. So it reinforced and verified Dr. Amy Edmondson's work. If you're interested in studying this more, Dr. Amy Edmondson has some wonderful YouTube videos and interviews if you Google Dr. Amy Edmondson. But her research confirmed psychological safety exists when an environment where team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable. This allows individuals the comfort to share out-of-the-box ideas and creative solutions. I'm going to reinforce again, psychological safety is not comfort, It's a bit of taking risk, but it's supporting people when they do. And we're going to do a deeper dive into psychological safety as well. The Dr. Edmondson came up with a brief survey that will help individuals and organizations examine psychological safety. And if you think about these questions, you can answer these just in your head. If I make a mistake on this team, it's held against me. Hopefully not. Members of this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues. Hopefully, yes. People in this team sometimes reject others for being different. Hopefully not. So you get a sense of her 7 questions are actually quite revealing for organizational safety. Another person doing research on this is Timothy Clark. And he did a book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. And I love this research. If you think about being psychologically safe, there are 4 roles that we often play in an organization where safety is really important. Psychological safety. Do I feel safe as a learner? And when we think about individually, when we are in a learner mode, an apprentice mode, new to an organization, there's an intellectual component and an emotional component. Oh my gosh, I know my boss just told me this and now I forgot it, but I'm afraid to tell her I forgot it. In what organization has psychological safety, it's okay to go back and say, I know you told me this, could you tell me again? Could you tell me how I apply this? May I share something that I think I've just learned? That learner safety. I'm going to go down to the bottom right and say inclusion safety. And this has been tied to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do I belong? Do I feel like I belong? Do I have some self-esteem in the organization? Collaborator safety is, can I suggest an idea? May I bring an idea forward? Again, without feeling embarrassed and feeling safe. Can I make a difference? Challenger safety is, can I challenge the status quo to make things better? So what I love Timothy Clark did, he broke psychological safety down into these 4 roles that we all play. Am I safe as a learner, a collaborator? Do I feel included? Am I safe as a challenger? Now I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I gave Joyce a preview of the slides last week, and she said it was okay to do this. But when I started looking at all of this terminology and research around psychological safety, I took a step back and I said to myself, basically, all of these words are just a reinforcement of the Ohio Capitol values. And when I think about how you've defined the values of creating collaboration, communication, respect, expertise, accountability, trust, innovation, inclusion, growth, those all tie to all the words I said in the previous slide. Any big picture questions about psychological safety? So if you look at your worksheet, you'll see the next homework that you have is to think about the psychological safety and how does Ohio Capitol rate on that. So let's do another brief poll. Okay. I'm showing 39 of 39, 100% have answered. So again, this doesn't tell me that we don't feel safe as a challenger. but we feel most safe as a learner. Most safe included 8 of 39, and 7 of 39 feel most safe in collaborator. So the challenge, no pun intended, would be ask some open-ended questions and ask yourself, what can I do to help people feel comfortable in coming up with an idea that could make a difference?
And just to clarify that, Richard, the challenger safety is, from my understanding, people feeling safe and comfortable in challenging the status quo if they have an idea that's different than the bandwagon that everyone else is on. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Or the entire organization's going down, or my team or my department is going down a path. Are you comfortable saying, before we make this decision, could we discuss the benefits of this and make sure we're covering any concerns? The research says the psychological safety, when you are bringing forward an idea, you're still doing it with respect. You're not blaming any other people. You're not being overly critical, but something as safe as what I just said. And I've seen a lot of organizations, we've probably seen organizations ourselves that are going down a path where it's like, oh my gosh, there's some risks here. Have we talked about all the risks? Psychological safety would be, I can bring up those risks without feeling embarrassed, without feeling overly defensive. So I think leaders in rooms and team meetings can say the question I just asked. I think we're about to make a decision, guys. Before we do, could we just quickly highlight the benefits and quickly ask, what are the big concerns we should keep in mind as we go forward? People feeling safe asking and answering that question. Everybody okay with that? Okay, I will keep moving, and I got to get to the part where you guys give me where I give you homework. I'm sorry, I just have to assign myself homework. So let's go deeper into emotional intelligence and psychological safety. I talked before about the inner core of self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, what are other people feeling, social skill, moving other people forward. Let's examine how some of the emotional intelligence might work in real life. So this is from Marshall Goldsmith's book, Triggers, Creating Behaviors That Last. And there are many variations of this that I've seen in a lot of books, a lot of articles, but this is basic human behavior. And the formula goes, something happens, there's a trigger, which generates an impulse, which generates a behavior, which gets me the result. So believe it or not, I have taught this concept to high school students in the leadership program at Worthington High School. And here's the example I used at the Worthington High School. I usually pick on two students, and I will say, Joe, Sally, let's pretend that you're in political science class together. And Joe, Sally says something that you completely disagree with. Your impulse is, Sally's a jerk. She doesn't know what she's talking about. That drives a behavior where you go out into the hallway after the class and you tell everyone in the hallway, Sally's a jerk, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Fast forward to next semester, you walk into chemistry class and the chemistry instructor says, Joe, Sally, you're going to be lab partners this semester. Ouch. How's that going to work? So the key is to ask yourself some questions. This is what emotional intelligence is all about. So let's go revisit that story. Joe, Sally are in political science class. Sally says something that Joe completely disagrees with. And Joe says, wait a minute, this is an honors class. Sally had to be pretty smart to get into this class. I wonder why she said what she said. Maybe I could replace blame with curiosity. And my behavior becomes, after class, I approach Sally in the hallway and say, that comment that you made, could you tell me more? What are you thinking? How are you seeing it? What do you think I should know? Might lead to that result of a better relationship, more positive relationship. Fast forward to you get thrown into chemistry lab together, probably going to work a little bit better. In the workplace, we've got Joyce, help me here. We've got development, we've got capital markets, we've got finance, we've got underwriting, we've got legal, we've got all teams scattered all across the organization. We have natural frictions. If we pause and say, what do you need from me this week? May I tell you what I need from you? What does your team need from me this week? Here's what my team needs. Start with those open-ended, more self-aware questions, and then kind of, again, tie in, I know I'm a high D, I know I'm a high I. Let me pause if I'm talking to an S or a C on the disc and shut up. If I see an S and a C who's starting to withdraw, let me say to my S or C friend, what are you thinking about today? Let me ask some questions to pull them forward. Any questions about this formula? Does it show up in the workplace? Joyce, you can just tell me if you see heads nodding.
I see some head nods and smiles.
Good.
So I think we're good.
So here's my attempt at comedy. I will admit that I borrowed this slide from a fellow consultant who said I could use it. And the question we need to ask when we're forming a story in our own head, is our story and perception correct? And this is the old diagram cartoon of a bunch of scientists who are blindfolded. Each one of them thinks this is something different. None of them have the right perception. Let me back up, see what the big picture is, and try again. The other thing I will reinforce is in the workplace for emotional intelligence, it's always wonderful to have a partner who can help you when you're getting into some of those overdone or stress behaviors. And to share a Richard story, I think it's good to have a genie who can help you pause and verify. And these are two pictures, 25 years apart, of me and Jeannie Hadley. And Jeannie has given me full permission to use these pictures in my presentations. We have helped each other in the workplace. When I was the Senior Vice President of Global Human Resources at Sterling Commerce, Jeannie was my executive assistant. And Jeannie knew Richard very well. And Jeannie would say, walking a little fast today, Richard. She could see my stress behaviors, my overdone behaviors starting to emerge. And as I said earlier, high I, D on the disc, talking too fast, moving too fast, trying to get too many things done. Jeannie would say, walking a little fast today, Richard. When she said that, I'm not perfect, but I tried to pause and ask myself, the room I'm about to walk into, do they want the conversational Richard? Do they want the Richard who shows them appreciation first before he gets through his 87 slides? So in the workplace, I'm going to strongly urge you for your own emotional intelligence, if you need someone to pull you forward, you need somebody to slow you down in different times, have a person you can trust, a partner. These two pictures are Jeannie and me 25 years apart. We have not worked together for over 20 years. We still get together and have a Jeannie Richard Day every year. This can be a direct report. It can be your boss. It can be a peer. It can be anyone that you trust that will know to give you an honest feedback when you need it.
This is great. We have someone who popped up in the chat talking about who they have for their sounding board. And Tamara Thalen says she has a Sharon Anderson. I'm sure there may be others here that have their sounding boards, whether it's at work or even at home.
Yeah, very, very good. So have your own Jeannie would be my coaching. Getting back to the reality is what matters most to other people. It's not what triggers us. Sometimes it's the result we get. What matters most is the behavior. If we make a mistake, most people will forgive us if we've done it in a respectful, thoughtful, considered way. Behavior has the big impact. Our goals may define who we want to be. Our behavior defines who we are to other people. Some really smart guy wrote that quote at the top. And we can bring this back to personality types. But when I'm hurting, I need a partner whose first instinct is to move me toward healing. When I'm angry, I need a partner whose first instinct is to calm me toward positive action. I'm lucky enough to have Jeannie and my wife of 46 years, Joan, that she can help me in either direction. Theodore Roosevelt is attributed to this quote, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." And that all gets back to empathy and emotional intelligence and connections. When we think about being a leader, and I'm going to say that people who are leaders at Ohio Capitol, everybody can be a leader, no matter your role, no matter your title. You're going to fill 4 roles: be a builder, a persuader, a visionary, or an organizer. If you're ever have an opportunity to work with a coach, I think most coaches are going to say the key to growing and developing is being able to flex between these 4 boxes. I have a tendency to be a builder and a persuader. I call it Richard's charm. I also need to remember, what's the big picture? What's the story I'm telling? And what are the first 3 steps that I need to get done? So you can take some of these things and ask yourself again, I have a natural style toward one of these. How do I do the other 3 at least a little bit? Back to psychological safety, and we'll keep an eye on the clock, make sure we have time for our homework. We're going to do a little deeper dive on this as we did on emotional intelligence. Any other questions on emotional intelligence before I do the deeper dive on psych safety? Comments? Okay. Again, an environment where team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. This reinforces everything that I have done for organizations and with organizations for the last 40 years. Emotional intelligence is the key for individual coaching engagements. This is the foundation for team coaching. These quote from Amy Edmondson, psychologically safe teams know that work is uncertain and frame it as a learning problem. Leaders say, I may miss something. I need to hear from you. Leaders model curiosity and ask more questions. How I translate this quote is Dr. Edmondson is a big believer in framing. So if we can say, it's not a personal tension between you and me, we're trying to move some things forward. What are 3 different ways we could do this? If it is a personal tension, go back to that question of what do you need from me? Here's what I need from you. Number 2, when leaders can say, what should I know before we move forward? And when I say leaders, I mean everybody. What can an individual say? What do I need to know to move forward? What am I missing? That curiosity can be modeled on all levels. Dr. Edmondson also says psychological safety at work takes effort. It's not necessarily the norm, but it is absolutely worth the effort. So as we have, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was going to comment that I like how she frames the first bullet a couple slides before, where she framed it as a learning problem. And it reminds me of something that one of my teachers said in a class many years ago when I was getting my MFT, or marriage and family therapy. It was marriage and family certification, and the quote was, "You're not the problem and I'm not the problem. The problem is the problem and we're here to solve it together." So when you're having tension with somebody, that you're attacking the problem and not the person. And I just thought that was a really great way to kind of frame those areas where people feel triggered or they're butting heads. It's, we're not, the problem is the problem. You're not it. I'm not it. And just that way.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. Thank you. And by the way, Joyce, a couple people have come in. I've just admitted them, so I don't know if you need. We'll catch them up. This is being recorded. Joyce asked me to record this. So last time when I did this last July, I put together kind of a quick opening and then had the recording out on YouTube. So within a couple of days, I'll have that done as well. So to reinforce again, emotional intelligence is a personal attribute. Psychological safety is a team attribute. And we want to ask ourselves all the time, are we helping people feel safe as a learner, collaborator, being included, and being a challenger? Now, I'm also going to talk a little bit about psychological safety and performance are attributes of success. Everything I have read and everything I believe in my heart is that we can have psychological safety and still hold each other accountable. Psychological safety does not mean going into the woods and singing Kumbaya and not getting anything done. And if we look at this 2x2, we show that we need to have performance accountability and psychological safety to learn together. So let's think about that low accountability and low psychological safety. I don't care. Apathy. Or high psychological safety, low accountability. Man, I love this place. They never care if I get anything done. That's not very productive. Or I have high accountability and no psychological safety. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Anxiety, undue stress. Find the sweet spot where we can say, I want to support you and I want to challenge you. That's the language that I use in my coaching individual engagement work. Impact of psychological safety, if we do it right, it leads to willingness to ask, willingness to share, team learning, and improved performance. Psychological danger versus psychological safety. Comfortable admitting mistakes. This is what she found in healthcare. Learning from failure. Everyone shares. Better innovation. You're probably not going to get the great idea if you're shutting down the great ideas. You may not get the small idea if you're shutting down the small ideas. Versus fear, blame, indifference. So let me just pause. Is there anything in the way of your team or a team creating a psychologically safe environment? How can you work to break down those barriers? I'm just kind of leave that out as a thought question. And if you want to throw an answer to that first one in the chat, again, I'll glance at the clock. I think we're doing well. Is there anything in the way creating a more psychological safe environment? And Joyce, I'll trust that you're keeping an eye on that and will let me know if there's anything to bring forward. So I'm going to take a chance and say, I think the big thing that can hold teams back is trust, or the lack of trust. So when I ask the question, what gets in the way of psychological safety? Many people will say, I don't trust so-and-so, or so-and-so doesn't trust me. We have a lack of trust. And since trust is one of those core values for Ohio Capital, I know we all want to have trust and to build trust and maintain trust. So I'm going to have a few slides which we'll talk about the science of trust. I'm right here in the room. We have to talk about it.
I'm going to jump in. We've gotten some great answers in the chat to the question, what are the barriers, or are there barriers? Someone has said, no, OCCH is pretty team oriented already.
Okay.
Someone else said remote work and growth of staff, it creates difficulty in getting to know all of your team members. Another person said time. It can be difficult to take opinions and new approaches into account if there isn't that time to do the pause. And then, gaining trust and respect from your peers.
Okay, very good, very good. By the way, Amy, I didn't include a lot of information on this, but Dr. Edmondson has a great white paper on psychological safety and hybrid workplaces. So I'll be glad to send that reference to you, and you can distribute that as well. And it boils down to communicate, communicate, communicate. But sometimes easier said than done, standardizing some of those things. Great call outs. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So since that last one Joyce mentioned was trust, with her permission, I'll keep digging into what's behind trust. Everything I've read that we've mentioned today, and some of the resources I'll cite at the end, say that trust is extremely important in working as a team. And trust is about vulnerability. Do I feel safe saying, I don't know? Do I feel safe saying, I have an idea, I'd like to bring it up? And trust takes time, but the process can be accelerated. And like any good relationship, trust among team members must be maintained over time. I have a colleague who breaks trust down into 3 types of trust. And I'd like to go over these very deliberately and ask you 2 questions. The first one is contractual trust. Do I keep my obligations? What I said I would do? Do you keep your obligations? What you said you would do? Can we rely on each other? That's a contractual trust. Do I believe you have the skills and ability to do what you said you were going to do? Do you believe I have the skills and ability? That's a competence trust. And the third one is communication trust. Do I tell you what you need to know to feel part of the whole and to do your job? Do you tell me what I need to know? Also, what do you say about me when I'm not in the room? Are you gossiping about me? Or are you saying, Richard's pretty good. Gosh, he really added a lot to the webinar we had today. Communication has 2 components. Do you inform and do you talk positively? Are you curious? But inform and talking positively. So my colleague says, if one of these breaks down, trust breaks down. So my question is, how do you build trust? How do you demonstrate that you will hold your obligations? You will do what you said you were going to. How do you demonstrate that you are competent? If you're not competent, let's say there's something new that's happening at Ohio Capital, you're still in learning mode. Will you say to your colleagues, I'm still studying this, and just be open and vulnerable and build your own personal competence? Will you be positive and will you inform? That's my challenge. So what happens when you lose trust? If you want to throw a question there or a comment there into the chat, when trust breaks down, what happens?
I would say that the 2 things that came up most frequently are probably around competence trust and communication trust. I think we do really well on the contractual trust, doing what we say we're going to do, or at least that was the feedback I got. But the competence trust, trusting that the other person was hired for a reason and that they know what they're doing, I think is, and not feeling the need to kind of challenge that. And then also the communication trust, do I trust that when I'm not around, you are speaking positively of me, or is there a breakdown? I think those were the 2 things that came up most frequently when we started our culture work. And then we're also getting things in the chat, some of the, what happens when you lose trust, loss of credibility was said, uncertainty. If I can't trust this, what can I trust? Another person put, when trust breaks down, people tend to pull back or withdraw from those they lack that trust in. And that leads to a lack of collaboration and productivity. Another person said, I'm nervous around that person and don't want to go to the extra mile for them if I don't trust them.
So this is the coaching challenge, that if you can find the energy to say, maybe that person has a different personality type than me, maybe that person still is in learning mode, and then find a way to have a cup of coffee, have a Teams call, do something to say, I know we are still learning as an organization on this topic. What are you seeing on this topic? Here's what I'm seeing. How could we do this better? Ask that question. Just help that person build a little bit of confidence while you're also getting better yourself. I don't have a magic dust, but if you can start the conversation, you got a lot better chance of success versus not trying. Okay. Now I speak with authority. I speak with authority voice. So I hope you appreciate that. High I, high D. So keep building on this. I'm now going to tie in that awareness and trust. And this is some material from Patrick Lencioni, who wrote the landmark book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And even in his book, he says, if you can move from calling them dysfunctions to how do you build the competency, he says you can build that awareness and trust by just knowing each other's personality style, needs, and stress, understanding the different personalities, if you can get to know someone on a personal level. So, Joyce, what's the Joyce story? Just share your life histories. You'll find something in common, and then close with appreciation. I really thank you for the time today. That can go a long way in building awareness and trust. On a personal level, you can also take responsibility to admit your own weaknesses and mistakes. I'm still learning about this myself. Could I ask you for some help? And I'm unclear about what the line is between capital markets, development, underwriting. Could we just have a little coffee or a Teams and flow chart this? Something as simple as that. And obviously giving people the benefit of the doubt, take risks in offering feedback, appreciate, focus time on important issues, not politics. I think Joyce said earlier, the problem is the problem. Offer and accept apologies, and look forward to meetings. So I think I'm fairly honored. Somebody was looking forward to this meeting. There's a lot of people on this Zoom today. Thank you. Lencioni also says that we are often guilty of a fundamental attribution error, that we often attribute other people's success to their environment and our own success to our character. So ask yourself, what story are you telling about the other person? That other person had it made. They were born into a rich family, and oh, daddy got on the job and they don't know anything, but I had to work and earn everything I got. I had to study. The other person may have studied too, The other person may be working pretty hard. Just be aware that we categorize people quickly. Human judgment. Before you rush to judgment, manage your stories and emotions. Ask your genie if you're telling yourself the right story. To reinforce again, psychological safety is the team attribute. Trust is between two people. Everything starts between two people. Everything starts with emotional intelligence at an individual level. If you don't have these two things, trust and psychological safety, you get guarded relationships and toxic politics. I'm really encouraged by the comment that Joyce shared earlier that Ohio Capital does a lot of these things right. Hopefully you can just take a couple tips and do things just a little bit better. Reinforcing accountability on strong teams, it occurs among peers, that I don't want to let down my peers. And that last one, I'm not a Pollyanna. I know that sometimes performance issues are real, behavior issues are real, and team leaders have to step up and confront those. And if people are crossing lines, they need to be held accountable. Psychological safety is not going into the woods and singing Kumbaya. It involves setting a tone or environment where people can speak up with respect and feel comfortable doing that and still be held accountable. Accountability ensures that poor performers do feel pressure, that potential problems are quickly addressed. It actually establishes respect and avoids excessive bureaucracy. And again, these are from Lancioni. So in my coaching world, and those of you who were in the July webinar last July, you will maybe recognize this slide. But I tell people and organizations that what I do can be done by individuals, can be done by teammates, can be done by leaders, by managers, et cetera. And that is, I see my role in leadership, team coaching to have 4 parts. I want to challenge my people I'm working with to hold commitments and accountability for themselves. I want to motivate them to try some new behaviors and methods. I want to support people. Change is really hard. Nothing is easy, but it's often necessary. And I want to verify that, are we working on the right things based upon comments and progress? So I think teams can do this for each other. Hey, before we leave the room, let's make sure, are we doing the right things? Let's just pause and say, okay, this is going to be hard. And, we can do this. And let's hold each other accountable. Moving through those 4 boxes, again, similarly to personality profiles, it's behavior. So I think we have reached a breakout time. I'm going to just hold this slide up here for a second. And if you look at the questions I have here, they should reflect the questions at the bottom of your worksheet. On the second page of your worksheet, you'll see some tips for actions that you can build emotional intelligence and psychological safety. I'm going to stop the share. And Joyce, do we have a count on how many people we have?
Not yet. I'll try to go through this quickly and see if I can get a number.
I know we wanted to kind of put people in groups of 3 if possible, so I just want to make sure I create the right number of breakout rooms.
Looks like we have
Joyce, the count looks like 48.
48. Okay.
Yep, that's what I got too. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to create 15 breakout rooms, and Joyce may hang with me. Joyce, if you get into a breakout room, you want to participate, feel free. If you want to come back and we can just do a quick signal check. So I'm creating 15 breakout rooms. So there may be a couple that have 4, but most will have 3 just to be safe. And your homework would be to answer those questions, have a group conversation. It's 3:31 on my clock, so I will keep an eye on that and bring you back together in about 15 to 18 minutes for our close for stopping at 4. Does that sound appropriate?
Sounds great.
Okay, I'm opening all the rooms. You should be assigned a room now.
But asking more questions to invite conversation would be great too.
So as we all come back together, Joyce just shared the one thing that she can do is to ask more questions.
This is being recorded.
You're back.
And Joyce, it looked like most folks are back.
Yes, it looks like everyone's back.
Okay, very good.
We have one or two stragglers, but we're almost all here, I think.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to do a little time check, make sure we wrap up at 4. And I hope everyone had some great conversations and had some great.
Please turn that down.
Yeah, had some great ownership. I want to reinforce we shouldn't expect other people to be solely responsible for psychological safety. We can take responsibility ourselves. And we had some great conversations in a little small group that I was part of. So Phil Jackson, who was the NBA winning coach, had a wonderful quote: "The strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each team member, or each member is the team." Again, emotional intelligence is the individual core. Psychological safety is the team core. John Kennedy said.
Richard, can I just jump in and ask,
Yep,
remind
please.
people to remute their lines, please? Thank you. Otherwise, it's not going to be clear in the recording.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you. So John Kennedy's famous quote was, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." So we had our breakout room. We've already answered this chat question in the small groups, but I want to reinforce when we do our jobs daily, we own, I own, you own psychological safety for Ohio Capitol. And again, I am just so thrilled to work with this organization. You guys do good work for so many people. I'm proud to be part of the extended team. So let me just close with a couple of the resources that I had. You'll be getting a copy of the slide deck, by the way. Joyce has a PDF that she can make available. As we close and do the wrap up, everyone will have this as a resource. I did want to reinforce one point as we go through here, and that is when you think about having a partner, and I'm going to go back to this book here by Marshall Goldsmith on triggers, and we looked at that formula of how you tell yourself a story, and it's good to have a partner in doing that, someone who can help you. Then make sure that you are talking how you can help the situation, how you can solve the problem, and you're not just getting together to gripe. That's a key component. I actually have a YouTube video myself telling a story about not being a partner in gripe. So I appreciate making sure these are positive. Again, the resources that I had, and I'll say thank you for inviting me. I'll stop the share. And so I can see all those wonderful faces and those people who don't put themselves on video. Come on, just one last wave. Any questions, comments? I can keep an eye on the chat now myself as I close out the slide deck.
I will share that Tony put something in the chat earlier, recommending the book, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. We do have that book on our Libro audiobook platform, and it talks about really how to build trust amongst individuals and teams. So I highly recommend that book. And it is free to you to download on our audiobook platform. And we will try to get these other books that some of the books on Richard's resources pages here have already been added to our Libro library, but we're going to try to get them all up there for everyone.
Richard?
Yes.
What do you think is a good way to regain trust if you feel that you've broken it? If you're the culprit for breaking it?
Oh, if you're the culprit. Yes, I have found the age-old sincere apology. I need to let you know I messed up.
But I think sometimes before you have an opportunity to do that, word may have spread away a little bit.
So other people are talking about what you did wrong or the wounded feelings. So
Sure.
yeah, and again,
or guilt by association even.
Yeah, I'll appreciate that. I'll go ahead and tell you the little partner in gripe story that early in my career, I was at Battelle, and I thought I could solve every human resources problem better than anybody else in human resources. And I had a friend, I'll say her name was Sally. Sally and I would go to lunch every day, and we would just complain and complain and complain about what was wrong with the organization. So word got back to my boss. His real name was Les. And Les called me into his office and he said, "You and Sally have become partners in gripe. Stop it." I created a little YouTube video telling that story. And I think it's a lesson that maybe if you've broken trust, stop the bad behavior and show up more positively and just win it back a day at a time, a day at a time, a person at a time. Show up as the usual good, friendly Richard, and recognize that Stephen Covey talks about having a relationship bank account, and you got to deposit some quarters in it to get it back up to the value of $1.
Indeed. Thank you.
I hope that helps. And again, if there's a wounded person, say you're sorry. Great question, comment. Thank you. I don't like admitting I was a partner in gripe, but I thank Les every day for pulling me back. Okay, I think it's 3:55. I always like to give people 5 minutes for a quick restroom break. If you all hurry, you can get to your 4 o'clock. I want to say again, I have opportunities to work with Ohio Capital in different ways. I appreciate you guys inviting me to be part of the team, and my wonderful partner, Joyce.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Richard.
Can I
Thank
answer
you, Richard.
question? Richard, can I answer one other question in the chat? Kip had a good comment. It's hard to get to know new employees and establish the necessary components that we discussed today when we're all working remotely, and how can we address that? I do have some great resources on building, doing relationship building when you have remote teams, and I'm going to be sending that out as well. Some really wonderful resources for managers and for team members on that. So great question, Kip. Thank you. And thanks again, Richard. This has been really great. I appreciate it.
Okay, happy Monday to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a
Bye.
great day, guys. Bye.